My name is Javier. I work at Google. I lead a team of researchers, user experience researchers. So these are people who study users and try to understand how they use our products, what kind of problems they have, what they need, and then they go back to the engineering teams to say in which direction we should change, we should fix, we should improve our products. I will give you an introduction into the field, a couple of things that we often get wrong when we develop products. And I didn't come up myself with these kind of things. It's actually all based on Norman. If there's one thing you should take with you from today, it's actually you should totally read that book. If you are in a startup and you develop a product, software, hardware, mix of it, doesn't matter, that book is mandatory. What Don Norman says is that a lot of mistakes that happen when we use products in our day-to-day life are actually not human mistakes. They're often called human mistake, user error, but actually it's not. It's a mistake in design. It's product that were not designed for humans. So a lot of products are psychopathological. They're sick. They're not made for us. And there's a couple of things that we have to know about how humans work to make the product work for humans. And so that's what the field of user experience is about. It's about knowing how people work with technology so we can build the technology in a way that it works for people and not the other way around. So there are 6 factors that are key when you develop a product that you should take care of and you should think about very carefully so your product is a success. Affordance is when a product tells you how to use it by its look, its visual appeal. It tells you, it speaks to you, and it shows you what you can do with it. Couple of examples are a chair, right? This chair, never saw this chair before, never sat on this chair before. Look at this chair, I know it's a chair. If you go, you see a device you never used before, you see a button, it's designed like a button, you will know it's a button, and you will be tempted to press the button. Anyone who has kids knows how tempting a button is, no matter if you know what it does or not, because it's designed like a button. Simple things, they don't need explanation. They don't need instruction. The moment you see something labeled where people start to write, press here, not here, that's when the design went wrong. And I'll give you an example. This here is an elevator here in Switzerland, close to where I live in Basel, from a new shopping mall, was built a couple of years ago, so it's a new interface. If you go there, you want to call the elevator, where do you press? You can go there to this elevator, stand next to it, and it will not take longer than a minute until somebody comes and presses here or here. But that's wrong, because these here are a status indicator. It tells you which elevator is coming. This here is the button you have to press so the elevator comes. Now, these 3 elements look the same, so by definition, they have the same affordance. 1 is a button, 2 are not, right? And so that's why you press the wrong thing. Now, you can design this in another way. You will see not a single person pressing this here to call the elevator, because this here is a status indicator. It's designed as such. You look at it, the affordance tells you, I will tell you where the elevator is. Don't press me, while this here is clearly a button. So you will press it. Second factor, restrictions or constraints. The flip side of affordance, when something tells you how to not use it. Give you an example, a sink in Denmark, Copenhagen. You want to wash your hands after going to the toilet. So how would you operate that? Typical things I hear, I would turn it in this direction, or I would pull it because there is a little angle here, you see? If the restriction is right, you would know which way to operate that and which way not. Actually, it's inwards. Inwards, and nobody comes up with that. And I'm still convinced that the plumber who mounted these just made it the wrong way, because there's no way this can be designed on purpose like that. I mean, look, it touches here, the sink. That's ridiculous. But even if that would be what they wanted, the design needs to tell you in which direction it should go, right? If you take this one here, that wouldn't happen. You look at that, you know you have to pull it, you have cold and hot with the colors, there's a wall at the backside, so you wouldn't put it in the other direction. It's clear. Third factor is mapping. That's when things belong together in your user interface. Think about an online form. You have 10 fields, right? And you have name, address, email, and so on. Every field looks the same. They only make sense when you look at the label that belongs to the field. You will know what to enter. Easy example from your day-to-day life. Your kitchen. Think about your kitchen. And now tell me, which button do you need to operate to use the hot plate on the right lower side? I bet you don't know. How can that be? You use the kitchen possibly every day. If you don't work for Google and they cook for you, you do it yourself, then you know you use it every day. Still, you can't tell which button you need to operate. Every time you need to look at the label because the mapping is screwed up. There is no mapping between the button and the hot plate. So that's how it's normally is. Pretty random, like 4 buttons, 4 hot plates, whatever. An easier way would be a paired setup where you have like 2 buttons are for the hot plates on the left, 2 are for the right, but still you don't know which button is for what. Or you could have a full mapping, like this. Or you could have here, you could also put the buttons in the same order, 2 by 2. You don't need labels anymore. You can remove the labels. You have a full mapping. 4th factor, causality. Causality is when an action leads to a reaction. When we do something, as people, we do something and something happens, we tend to do a causal interpretation, right? We say, I did this, and that's why this happened. And that's important, right? You need that. When you're a toddler, you go to the fire, you put your hand in the fire, and you burn yourself, and it hurts, right? So you make that connection. I burnt myself because I touched the fire, so I won't do that again. So that's important, right? Sometimes these causalities are wrong. Sometimes something happened, not because you did it, maybe because of another reason. So that's something you need to know when you create a product. When do I place feedback? We have here an example of a device in an Asian company where this nice person is helping you out. And you can go, and after you got whatever service they offer, you can say if you're very satisfied, or unsatisfied. Let's not talk about the scale, which can be questioned by itself. But you see the button in unsatisfied is missing. Why is that? Somebody have an idea? Yeah. It's pressed a lot. So it fell down because that's a really shitty clerk. Like it's not doing a good job, right? Could be. Other hypotheses. He ripped out the button so you can say that you're not satisfied, right? Other hypotheses. Maybe it just fell off. Maybe it just was broken. Bad production, right? Why did you not say that? Because you're human. You do causal interpretation. If that button is missing, there needs to be a reason. Either the person took it out so you can say you're not satisfied, or it fell down because the service is so bad, right? It's normal. It's how we work, right? And you need to know that about causalities and feedback if you design your user interface. 5th factor, transfer effects. Transfer effects means when we transfer what we know to a new situation. And so that's normal. Again, since you're a toddler, you learn something and then you apply it to a new situation. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, you need to accommodate. In user interfaces, that means people don't live in a vacuum. You never get a new user that never interacted with anything before. That doesn't exist. Your users will have a lot of experience with other things, and they will apply that to your product, and you need to know that. So here's an example from an online form where you need to say where you live. And I live in Switzerland. So obviously, I go to S, and it's not there in Switzerland. It's not there in Schweiz. It's not there Swiss. And I'm like, where is my country? I'm a decently educated person. I know how alphabetical ordering works. That's knowledge. I know how my country is called. Still, I can't find it, right? So the transfer of all the knowledge I have fails. And you see that Switzerland is here between Congo and Côte d'Ivoire. Why is that? CH, exactly. The person who did that form thought, I'll just sort according to the abbreviation of the countries, but I won't tell users. Because if the country would start CH, Switzerland, I would have known where to look for, right? So that's a failed transfer effect, negative transfer. You guys might work on a new product, something that didn't exist before. And what I hear a lot also with us at Google is like, well, this is new. We get to decide the rules, right? We get to create the standards and the patterns. And that's not how it works. It's not true. You don't get to decide that stuff. You have to know about what is out there, and you need to tap into that to make your new product work. You can't disregard everything that is out there just because you are working on this new shiny thing that nobody else did before. You still have to figure out how to do it. It's even more complicated for you because you're creating something new, and so people need to understand that part. You don't want to burden them with having to relearn everything else. So that's how you need to tap into the behavior that is already out there. The sixth factor, and the last, are stereotypes and habits. So these are things we learned, and we hate change, right? You learn something, you know how to use it, and that's it. Don't change that, right? I have enough other stuff on my plate, like languages, for instance, red is danger, green is safety. Right? That's like in Western cultures, not in all cultures like that. But for us, red means fire, my house is burning, run. Green is like a meadow, food, safety, right? So I'm good. In other places, that's different, right? Or think about the way we drive here, traffic, right? Right hand, left hand. Totally different in the UK if you're there. So go and try to change that. Like if your design tries to change that, you're into trouble. It's not going to be an easy ride. So try to think about ways to not do that. And this picture is like my favorite picture for that. Because if you're in London, like if you're from here, or if you're from a country where there's right-hand side of traffic, you go to London, they changed all of that. They changed your cultural language about traffic, right? So you don't know how it works anymore. And so there were that many accidents that in London, everything is labeled where you have to look because there were so many accidents. Of course, that means if you have a product that is already out there, for instance, Facebook or YouTube, we always face that. Whenever you change something, you're changing stuff people already know, and they hate it. So now you have these factors, right? And now it's all about creating good experiences. How do you do that? How does that work with these factors when people interact with things? And that's the thing with the user's mental models or conceptual models. It's the same term. You have a system and it's created by a designer. So whatever model the designer has, we'll put it in the system. The user comes, has their own model, and how do they create that? With all these factors. They take affordances, restrictions, mappings, cultural languages, things they learn, perform, all these things. They mash it up together. They create a mental model before they interacted with your product the first time. It's a hypothesis. It's a model that allows them to simulate how it will be to interact with your product. And then they do it. And if your product is designed well, it will work. That means their model, the hypothesis they created in their head, will be the correct one, will be the one from the system. If it doesn't, the user needs to adapt, to change, back and forth. No, doesn't, error, trial and error, trial and error, trial, until it works, or the user gives up and leaves and never returns. And you lost, and you don't want that, right? So what's the goal? You need to understand what the user's model is. You need to understand how users think. And that way you will be able to design your product in a way that it works. Why is this so difficult? Why do we still get it wrong? And that's the story about the people. People are different. It's super difficult to design for everybody. It's really difficult to design for everybody because people are so different, right? And so design is a compromise, right? If you think about a normal door height, then 99% of users might not bump their heads there because they're not as tall, but there are people who will bump their heads on a normal door. So it's a compromise. A rule of thumb I always give to our engineers is like, we should design for 95% of the people. It sounds like a lot, but actually 1 out of 20 is left out. And everybody who is left-hander, who uses their left hand as a dominant hand, will tell you a story how often things don't work for them because they're designed for right-hand side. And there's about 10 to 15% of left-handers, so a lot more than these 5% were allowed to leave out. And then the most common mistake, don't design for yourself. Like engineers come, like they create something, and I look at that, and I'm like, nobody will understand that. And we're like, I will understand it. Well, hopefully you will understand it. You designed it. I mean, come on. And so they go like, well, but the average user. I'm like, what? The average user? Who cares? Right? It needs to work for the extremes, right? What about old people? What about young people? What about people from different cultures? What about people who can't read? What about people who speak a different language? What about blind people, right? So it's the extremes that you need to think about, and the other ones will come for free. Figuring out how to not think about yourself when you're designing your product is the key thing. And that's when it helps when you speak with users, when you involve them in the process. There is an entire field, user-centered development, user-centered design, speaking about that. If you don't know about that, then read into that. There's courses, there's a lot of online material, methods on how to include users in your development process. So you get always that additional perspective into your development, and you don't start designing for yourself and suddenly find out most people don't understand it because they are not you. That was my little spiel here. If you're not happy, my unsatisfied button is broken, and I am open for questions.